Good afternoon, everyone. We are at our meeting time of 1:30 p.m. I'd like to welcome everyone and thank you for being here today. I would like to acknowledge that we are within the territory of the Sechelt First Nation. We have an amended agenda today, as I said earlier, from what was previously published online, as we did have a last-minute item brought forward from our committee meeting this morning. So if I can ask for a motion to approve the amended agenda. So moved, Director Beamish, seconded Director Seegers. Any other additions to the agenda or changes at this time from directors? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion carries. Our minutes of our regular board meeting from November 15th, 2018. May I have a motion to approve? So moved. Seconded? Seconded. Any errors, changes, omissions, additions? Seeing none. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Any business arising from the minutes and unfinished business from last meetings? Nope. All righty. Moving on to our presentations and delegations. We do have two delegations presenting today. We are going to start with Gail Nielsen from the Elphinstone Community Association regarding District Lot 1313. Before Gail begins, just a reminder to both delegations that you do have 10 minutes for your presentation. And then after your 10 minutes, then I'll open it up to directors to ask questions of yourself and regarding the presentation. And so from there on, we'll begin. Please, Gail, go right ahead. Oh, and don't forget to turn on your mic. There you go.
Is it on now?
Yes.
Okay. And it is a PowerPoint presentation, so does that mean a movement?
No,
has to
your
happen?
time starts after we move out of your way.
I will try and be prompt with this. Thanks. And first of all, congratulations to our new board. It's wonderful to see you all since the election. And thank you for hearing our delegation. I'm on the board of the Elphinstone Community Association, and I have a couple of people here from the neighbors group, and I think they wanted to. Were you guys going to come up, or Colleen and Herman? They were actually part of the delegation too. So Colleen, do you want to come up? So Herman Zeltner and Colleen Clark are adjacent neighbors to 1313. And there's some people in the audience who are also, neighbors and concerned citizens. There's also a few other board members from the Elphinstone Community Association here. I'm the secretary of it. This photo was taken at the end of one of our walks that we've been conducting into the forest for the last year. Okay. So we're here because BCTS has put our beloved Reed Road Forest, DL 1313, for auction in January of 2019, which is very close. And they had put it up for auction in 2013, again in 2017 and 2018, but each time the community has objected to it. And, we're quite concerned that this block be preserved. Neighbors have written letters. The association has written letters to the various ministries, BC Timber Sales, copies to SCRD. So I'm sure it's around in files somewhere that we, the copies of our letters. Okay, so the Elphinstone Official Community Plan, created in 1987, updated in 2008, also says that this block should be acquired or saved by the regional district for park and recreation. As you can see, this is from page 60. It's in your packages. The page 60 and 61 are in the packages. This is from our OCP. And so you can see some information there. It's in the old Gibson's Watershed Reserve. It says it's a large site. It's not really 48 hectares. Not that large of a site, really, of a type of forest that once covered all of Area E. And we really have only this small portion left. The Elphinstone APC, Area Planning Commission, has also argued for its preservation. There's minutes. I have actually extra copies in my file here of the minutes of this meeting, but this is a section from those minutes. The part in italics is the SCRD's position, which is that the SCRD does not support logging going on in that block, and they were requesting response from the APC, and these are some of the points that the APC has made, but there's a couple more pages actually of points that are in the minutes. But these are some of them, and I don't know if anybody from the APC is in the audience today, but the APC also would like to see this preserved. It is a watershed reserve. It's for property protection because it's a very steep slope in that forest, so there could easily be erosion. In your packages, we've made a few points in there why the ECA and the neighbors would like to preserve it. It's a beautiful example of mainly coniferous but also mixed deciduous forest. There was a fire in 1906 that went through the whole area, and this block, Reed Road Forest, has grown up since the fire, so it's just naturally regenerated. And I won't take up too much time because I want to get to the questions that we have of the board and our request of you. But all these points are in the package. There was a report done by Alan Banner, a biologist, that ELF actually commissioned to look at a block, which I believe they'll be speaking to you about shortly, and also Reed Road Forest. He found there's some items there, but there's a link you can go to for his report. Just highlighted a couple of things that this forest is in the CWHDM designation, and that stands for Coastal Western Hemlock Biogeoclimatic Zone Dry Maritime. And this kind of forest supports either red or blue listed ecologically communities. And he goes on to say that there is mature forests, good structural diversity, well-developed plant communities, and based on, he says in his report, based on the very well-developed understory communities, justifies a higher ranking of preservation. So the community feels that the relatively small amount of money the province will collect compared to the value of the forest, we don't believe that it's worth the risks that our community faces. And we feel that the SCRD are our allies in preserving this forest. You're on record as wanting to preserve it, and those are the risks that we face. If the forest is logged, mudslide, debris, instability, because as I said, it's fairly steep terrain, loss of biodiversity, habitat, tourism as well, actually. So we just don't feel that it's worth that. I mean, sure, there might be a few jobs for a few weeks that the community might acquire, but other than that, will these losses, these risks, far outweigh what our community could ever possibly gain from that being logged. So the questions of the SCRD, our questions are, You'll see in your package the letter that we received from BC Timber Sales, and suggesting in there that the SCRD has had a chance to pursue a change in land use status, so we wanted to know what the status of that might be. And I'm sure that the SCRD has been meeting with the various ministries. We were wondering if you can tell us what the results of those discussions are. In the letter from the BCTS, it talks about a facilitated meeting between the BCTS and the APC. We weren't sure what that really meant and wondered if you were able to tell us about that, plus any other questions you might have for us, and our request to you. Because of the urgency of this, we would like the SCRD board to contact the ministries involved, and BCTS, BC Timber Sales, and request that this auction of DL 1313 be halted. We also request that the SCRD undertake a process so this doesn't keep coming up for us, leading to the long-term preservation of this forest, whether as a park or as a conservation area. We know that since it's in the Squamish area, we know that there's some sensitivity around something being, it being called a park. So we prefer the term conservation area. Also, DL 1313 should be incorporated into the upcoming land use planning. We understand that the previous outgoing board did meet at the end of October and to talk about land use planning for all of Mount Elphinstone. But until such a land use plan is developed, there should be a moratorium on logging of any of these critical areas on Mount Elphinstone, including our beloved DL 1313. So that's the end of our presentation, and I've got all the questions that you just saw on that. I hope I've got one for everybody, but here's our list of our questions. Herm, could you hand those out? Those are their questions and what our request is. Our questions and a request. So we're open for questions from the board.
And the timing was absolutely perfect, Gail. Okay. Can I have a motion from one of our directors to receive the handout, please? So moved and seconded. It's okay, we can share. And seconded. And all those in favor of receiving the handout? Is the motion on the floor? All those in favor? Those opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you. Okay, so so the handout, as Gail indicated, is the questions for the SCRD board. I'm going to open it up to our directors for questions, please. Director Lamb, please.
I'm just wondering if we know what the health of this forest is. There's in different areas around the coast, there are different diseases that affects the trees and how they grow and how they can stand up. I know in the where would it be, the Secret Cove area, they have a root rot situation where trees, once you get to the fir trees, once they get to be 80 to 100 years old, their root system is usually diseased and they start falling over.
Okay. I'll put that to you, Gail. Do you know can you comment on the health of the forest?
The biologist was in there fairly recently, and there didn't appear to be any indication of any problem because it's matured gradually since the fire of 1906. We've been walking in there a lot, and none of us have noticed anything. There's wildlife. There's an amazing understory of plant growth including, we always remark, especially Colleen and I, we're starting to call it to the huckleberry forest, because the huckleberry plants grow to well over 6 feet tall. That's not from a tree, that's from the ground. But I haven't heard of any any issue with that. Have you? Have either of you? Or
No, the report would state that Alan Banner, there was no, I could not see anything in that report that refers to that there is disease in the forest.
Yeah, microphone, sorry. Directors, questions? Director Ties, please.
Well, maybe we can move the questions that were for the SCRD board to staff and see if they want to respond to those.
Certainly. Staff, did you get a copy? No, you didn't. Director B. Mitchell. Yeah. Sorry about that, staff. Okay, we'll just give them a moment to look. But while our staff is looking at the questions, I'm going to go over to Director McMahon, please.
I didn't. Thank you for the presentation. Lovely photos. I didn't have a lot of questions at this time. I have been asking a lot of questions, but I didn't have questions of the delegation. But I did want to point out that this urban-rural interface is something that we need to plan for across the whole coast, because this is right adjacent to residential properties. And we're going to have this problem in other places unless we deal with it on a larger scale, either as part of our regional growth strategy or as part of the Mount Elphinstone land use plan, or preferably both.
Thank you. Director Beamish, please.
I agree. We're in that place right now. We're a new board, as you can appreciate, but there's an awful lot happening on the coast, and we are talking about a regional growth strategy and an Elphinstone protection area. Why would we want to encourage logging to occur while those activities are going on? And besides the fact that Gibson seems to be cutting down all its trees right now, we are also moving into looking at a tree protection bylaw in Gibson's to halt that process. And I've got to be consistent with saying that we're looking at in Gibson's to how can we protect the trees that we have. And I certainly would encourage the board to move to protect 1313 and other areas that are threatened by logging at this time, because we need to take a good look at what's happening on the coast in terms of that whole area of the environment and protection environment, and working with the Squamish and the Sechelt Nation with their energies and their objectives as well. So when it comes to a vote, I will support it. Thank you.
Okay, over to, I think I have Director Julius, and then I'll come back to Director Ties.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's probably more of a, I think, a comment or than is a question, but I was wondering if there was more than one ELF group. Okay, it doesn't sound like it, but the reason why I'm asking is because there was some logging taking place up the B&K Road in Roberts Creek. There was some logging taking place up there somewhere, and I got a call because there was something that was going online that the ELF group was saying that the Sechelt Nation and the Squamish Nation were supporting everything that they were doing. And I quickly phoned one of my counselors and told him what I had seen. Is it true? He said, no, it's not. So I've got an uncle on the Squamish Nation. I phoned him, and he said, no, we don't support that. So I contacted this group, and I asked them, I said, did you guys get permission from the Sechelt Nation and the Squamish Nation to say what you're saying, that we support this? And these people, and they must have put me on their loudspeaker, because they started swearing at me, these people, like I mean really, really harsh language. And all I was asking was if they asked these governments for support. So as the conversation went on, I could hear these three gentlemen. Like I said, they must have had their speakerphone. I could hear the three people. And is there a Willard Joe that is part of your group? Or an Audrey Joe? Okay, so this is probably not that ELF group then, because they were claiming to be ELF something. I don't know. But that's why I was just curious, because, when they were talking to me over the phone, like the language they were using and claiming to be ELF, so we should all know that there's something going on out there, that people are claiming they are you and abusing people like me. So it was just something I wanted this group to know, Madam Chair, about there's somebody out there that is actually doing that. Okay, thank you.
Totally uncalled for, Thanks for bringing that to our attention. I understand the previous director had been in touch with Squamish, people in Squamish, about this block, and I've never seen really anything in writing, but he seemed to indicate that, if the preservation of this block would be okay, but basically the caveat that it should be a conservation area so that Indigenous people can continue, gathering of medicines and, the traditional uses in the forest, which we think is just a great idea. So that's kind of what we would like. We would like to see it as a conservation area.
Thank you. I have Director Ties, Director McMahon, as well as the questions that we put towards staff. So we'll start with Director Ties, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to give my support to what Director Beamish said, and also, I like the idea of putting forward to Flinrod that we and BC Timber Sales, that there be a moratorium on logging in the questioned areas until we have a proper land use plan in place. Thank you.
Director McMahon?
Yes, I just wanted to say there may be a little confusion between the Elphinstone Community Association, which is the Area E, used to be the Area E electors, and ELF, which is the Elphinstone Logging Focus, which is a group based in Roberts Creek. So those are two different groups, and this is the Community Association.
Okay, so I don't have any more on the speakers list, so I'm going to go over to staff for the questions because, as the audience will appreciate, we are new, so I can't answer a lot of these off the, but I'll go over to staff, and we'll start. I guess we'll start with question number one. Has the SCRD pursued a change in land use status for District Lot 1313?
Thank you, Chair. Chair Pratt, for background to the conversation, staff can offer some background comments and that we hope will help. So SCRD has, in responding to BC Timber Sales operating plan referrals, consistently expressed concern and opposition to the harvesting of the cut block on DL 1313 since it first appeared on the operational plan in 2013. And in addition to expressing opposition to harvesting, SCRD has also advocated for the involvement of residents in the consideration of what happens on the cut block. And the reasons stated have included watershed protection, hydrological impact concerns, fire concerns, ecological conservation, recreation, visual impacts, many of the items that were noted in the delegation's presentation. And also in responding to the operational plan, SCRD has acknowledged that planning harvesting activities in the absence of a land use plan for the area is a challenge. The regional district has also regularly reminded BC Timber Sales of the regional district's position on DL 1313 and included input from the Elphinstone APC with its correspondence to BCTS and to the ministry. And On October 29th, the regional district received correspondence from BCTS in response to letters sent by the regional district in May and June regarding our annual response to the operating plan, which again opposed harvesting of DL 1313. And staff will be bringing forward that correspondence on the December Planning and Community Development Committee agenda, which would provide another opportunity for the board to provide comment and direction. And staff can support that with additional information in the form of a staff report that I think should answer the more detailed questions that have been put by the delegation. Staff would note that despite consistent opposition from SCRD, that has been supported with additional correspondence from the community, including the Area Planning Commission. In spite of this and recent community letter writing, it appears as though the cut block is now headed to auction. And the opportunities for the regional district to protect the land through a park or conservation area or lease approach appear to have been exhausted. And given this, staff are supportive of the suggestion to request the minister to act to prevent harvesting. Thank you.
Thank you. Over to directors. Any other questions, either of our delegation or of staff for clarification, or any motion or anything coming, or recommendation from directors coming forward? Director Beamish.
Given that this is scheduled for auction in January, and that at Christmas time, traditionally, the provincial government especially shuts down, I agree with the urgency of a response. Our next meeting is not until December the 5th, and that I would certainly support a resolution, perhaps coming from one of the other directors, that we move with urgency back to the ministry again, and to give them a chance to, as well as a message to anybody who is considering to bid for the cut block, that, hey, there is active opposition here still. So,
Director McMahon.
Yes, I would like to move some draft recommendations prepared by staff. So the recommendations are: 1, that the SCRD write to the Minister of Forest Lands, Natural Resources Operations and Rural Development to request that the lands known as DL 13, including cut block A91376, be protected from logging and reserved for public use and ecological integrity. 2, and that the letter include background information on the regional district's consistent opposition to harvesting DL 1313, including concerns about surface and groundwater, geotechnical stability, fire risk, ecological conservation, recreation, and visual impacts. And 3, that the minister be requested to respond to the SCRD prior to the scheduled January 2019 timber license auction.
Do I have a seconder for the motion? Seconded by Director Ties. Any discussion to the motion on the floor? Director Beamish.
could a copy of that go to the MLA as well?
Would you like to make that as an amendment?
Yes, please, that the MLA be included in the letter.
And a seconder to the amendment? Seconded by Director McMahon. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, all in favor of the amendment? None opposed? The amended motion is on the floor. Any other discussion on the amended motion? Okay, seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the amended motion on the floor? Those opposed? Seeing none, the motion carries. Okay, any other questions for our delegation or for staff before we move on? Yes, sir. Go ahead, Herman.
Yeah, I just would like to mention about the hydrology assessment. We've asked repeatedly BCTS to send us that. We've never received it. There has never been a consultation with residents. We live right next to it. One creek has been illegally diverted 20, 30 years ago. We pointed it out. There has never been a discussion about that. So what they're saying about consultation with residents and so on has never happened.
And further to that, illegally diverted creek, our property, which is immediate to it, has been flooded with a full intact forest simply from that illegally diverted creek.
Okay.
So there's real issues there that no one has come to talk to us about. And the one thing that I'm failing to understand here is, am I to understand that although the SCRD has attempted to look at the process of this and to halt it, that BCTS can just ignore the community and log property that is completely immediate adjacent to residents? Is that what they can do? This blows my mind. There's no due process here.
Yeah. I'm going to put that one over to staff because they have the history, more of the history on this than I do.
I'm just a little shocked. Have I got that right? From what I understood what you said,
Okay.
you guys have done everything you can, but BCTS isn't listening, even though we want that as a park designation under the OCP plan, and they're just on January 19th they're selling it.
Over to staff, please.
Thank you, Chair Pratt. The gallery members' summary could be considered accurate. The regional district has consistently expressed not only opposition, but also a desire to see quality consultation done. And the regional district, at the staff level and at the director level for the former board, made great efforts to try to improve communication with BC Timber Sales, but on this particular cut block, that effort has not resulted in a change. Thank you.
So another question I have then.
Excuse me. We do have rules of order, and we do have. We can certainly address the questions after the meeting, or as well. But you have the. We have a board motion going forward to support the community's direction on this. So.
And we thank the board very much. Appreciate your work on this. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. And we can talk more after as well. Okay. Okay. Thank you so much. I'm going to give our first delegation just a couple of moments to vacate from their chairs. And I want to thank you very much for your presentation today. We really appreciate it. And I'm going to welcome up our second delegation, Ross Muirhead. Gail, did you have a memory stick in the machine?
Yes, I do, and I'm not sure how to get how it won't damage it?
No. Okay. And our next delegation is a video presentation or a PowerPoint presentation as well. So if any of the board members wish to move, maybe now would be the time to do it while Ross is getting set up.
And when's it projecting? What? Oh, okay.
I'll introduce you. Okay, so our second delegation, we have Mr. Ross Muirhead from the Elphinstone Living Forest regarding BC Timber Sales Cut Block A93884. And I understand you have a PowerPoint as well?
Yes. I do.
Okay, and our directors have just moved out of our way, and as soon as you start going is when I'll start the timer, but you have 10 minutes as well, and then time for questions. So go ahead, Ross.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity to present this important matter to you. This is concerning a forest in the middle of the proposed expansion of the Elphinstone Provincial Park. It's the Clack Creek Forest, and it's always been a key section of an expanded park. Today I'm asking for your support in the way of a motion, which, by the way, if you accept the motion, it could be part of the motion you just accepted for the Reed Road Forest, because it's going to the same agencies. Oh, yeah. Okay. So the block number is 93884, which has been referred through the RD staff a number of times. And just some background to the Elphinstone Park expansion. It's been a Roberts Creek official community plan item, and which the RD has supported through the bylaw 641. And in 2014, we presented a proposal to the board to support us in doing a conservation review of the entire 2,100 hectare expanded area. The current board at the time supported the initiative because it was seen as important to get more data and more what we call ground truthing of that forested area. And so we proceeded with contracting a well-known conservation biologist, Wayne McCrory, to undertake that work. And when it was completed in June of 2015, we submitted it to the board and it was received. And it was about a 60-page report, and one of the recommendations from McCrory was full protection of the 2,100 hectare area. One of the main things is that the expanded park would connect up the 3 isolated parks. We call them park islands because they're isolated from each other, and that would create an integrated forest and wildlife habitat ecosystem. Here we have just 2 examples of the many thousands of old-growth Douglas fir that are found throughout the area. And in comparison to Stanley Park, it would be 5 times the size of that well-known urban park. And so it's a real huge potential for driving tourism, and it's just an incredible natural asset that could be provided to the coast. Here's the outline of the expanded park. You can see the 3 small park parcels or islands, as we say. The lower one, there's a middle one, and then the upper left one is the westernmost park. And the Clack Creek Park, or the Clack Creek Forest, that's subject to the BC Timber Sales Cut Block, is in the middle between the second and the third park. So why is the Clack Creek Forest critical to be added to the new park boundaries, and why it should remain unlogged? Well, again, it provides critical connectivity between parks number 2 and 3. And some of the things we have discovered in there is BC's highest density of a blue-listed native plant, Rubus nivalis, also known as snow bramble, and it's threatened with extinction. And Wayne McCrory cites other leading conservation studies that suggest a 1,000 hectare protected zone around at-risk plants. And in 2014, the Minister of Environment contracted biologists to look at the habitat needs for red-legged and coastal-tail frogs, which are blue-listed, and recommended that some of the step pool streams that border this block and actually run through it be set aside as a wildlife habitat area, but that was never implemented. And the Alan Banner study that was completed this year, he did a detailed analysis of the forest, and it contains red listed. So that, again, that's plant communities that are on the edge of extinction, and those include red cedar and sword fern and red cedar foam flower plant communities. And it's important to realize that this forest has never seen industrial logging, so it's a natural forest regenerated after the major wildfire in the 1860s. And so it's incredibly rare type of forest at low elevations, such as we have here. It's easily accessible to the public. It'd be, any time a region gets a new provincial park, it drives tourism. And of course, the 2 First Nations would have to be consulted on how to best steward this area and invited in as co-managers. Here's an example of some of the effects of the wildfire disturbance. And so it's created a lot of interesting and unique natural features. Again, some of the forest types in there, we have 76% is Douglas fir, 23 hemlock, and 1% red cedar. It's the Western Hemlock Dry Maritime Zone. And the forest itself is not classic old growth, but as the biologist pointed out, It's mature enough so that it essentially functions as an old-growth forest. There's lots of woody debris. There's wildlife trees and a robust understory. And some of the other features of this Clack Creek Forest is series of step pool streams. There's the one on the left. They're small streams that amphibians can, their habitat. It's a great habitat for reproduction of their eggs. And again, some of the wildlife trees that you see on the right are emerging. The understories emerging up underneath. So today we're asking you to support a motion that would go to BC Timber Sales and other agencies in support of protecting this area. The block is up. There's an October 1st to December 31st timeline, and so it could be sold anytime now. Again, there's that certain urgency around it. And on the right-hand side is an example of what your motion may want to include in it. I'll leave that for you to decide what you think is the most salient points. But again, it's part of the park expansion area. It's part of the OCP. So we think it's in the board should support a motion calling for cancellation or deferral of the block. Here's an example of the Rubus nivalis, and again, it has another just a small feature of what's important in this forest, but otherwise it has incredible diversity of plants and actual animal habitat. So thank you for your action today on this time-sensitive matter.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Muirhead. I'm going to open it up to our directors for any questions that you have of our delegation today. Director Julius.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess earlier I made a mistake when the other group was here doing their speech, but it was this group here that I guess I needed to really inform. And you've already heard me. You've already heard my story that there was somebody out there claiming to be ELF, and treating people like me with these harsh words. So I just wanted to let you guys know that this is happening. Somebody's out there claiming to be you guys. And
okay, yeah, Mr. Julius, what you're referring to is another matter altogether. I don't know if you want to spend time discussing past histories, but I'll just clearly state that ELF is always in respect of First Nations rights. We don't speak for First Nations people. If there's an activity happening up on the mountain, there's sometimes hundreds of people who are speaking their own minds. We can't control what other members of the public say, but we try and base our information on science, on correspondence that we receive from other agencies. That particular block I think you're referring to was on Squamish First Nations, and we never presented to them directly about that block.
Yes, I respect everything that you guys are doing and what you guys are trying to do, but I just thought I would let you guys know what had happened to me, that people are saying they are ELF and doing these kinds of things. Okay, thank you.
Okay, sorry that happened.
Any other questions from directors? Director Lamb, please.
Just one of the slides you had there showed there seems to be some industrial use in that area, like the picture that we have on our iPads is not. Can you bring that back up for us?
Oh, okay. You'd have to.
Angie's taking care of that right now.
This particular slide?
Was there one before that, or maybe it was? No, okay, then that was
probably this one showing some past cut blocks in the area.
Well, yeah, I guess that's what it is. Yeah, because these are all cut blocks. I guess the gravel pit in Gibson's isn't even on there, is
And all the bare areas.
No, I know that, but you're coming around on the mountain there somewhat, yeah. Okay, so those are just cut blocks, they're not industrial.
They're not gravel pits or mine sites,
Or
no.
homesteads or anything like that.
No, we would suggest to the province that those cut blocks be regenerated and developed as towards mature forests, which is what we need more of in this area.
Well, they're supposed to be regenerated. They're supposed to be replanted.
Yeah, they
right
are
away.
replanted at this time.
Yeah.
Any other? Director Ties.
I'd like to make a recommendation to add, I guess, this cut block to the same recommendations that we just passed for the other District Draw 1313, and that because I think the sentiments across the board are similar. Now, while we haven't received any we have received some late correspondence from the BC Truck Loggers Association that we have not had a chance to look at yet. I think timing-wise, I think it's still a good idea to move this forward at this point because this block is up for auction right now. So that's my recommendation. Others might disagree. But.
Yes, Director McMahon, are you seconding the motion? No. Okay. Is there a seconder for? Oh, just a second. I'm going to. We do have a motion on the floor, but it hasn't been seconded. So we're just going to park it for a second because we should get some information from staff, especially because they have some. Please go ahead, CEO Levies and team.
So I think just from a procedural perspective, I'd like to clarify that this wouldn't be amending a motion that was already passed earlier in the meeting. This would be creating a new motion, and you could include it in the same letter, but it is a standalone motion, not amending a previously adopted motion.
Thank you for the clarification. Before we move on, though, I would like to ask staff if we have had any communication directly regarding this cut block with BC Timber Sales in the past. Please.
Thank you, Chair Pratt. As well as noting the need to protect recreational values for this cut block, SCRD has opposed the logging of the area in 2016, 17, and 18, noting that it's within the 1,500 hectare area identified within the Roberts Creek OCP for ecological and recreational protection. And the specific comment provided to BC Timber Sales earlier this year was that SCRD does not support logging within the 1,500. Oh, sorry, I'll start from the beginning. Is that absent further provincial land use level consultation on the Sunshine Coast and as per board resolutions from 2017 and 2016, the SCRD does not support logging within the 1,500 hectare area identified in the Roberts Creek Official Community Plan, map number 2, as an area for ecological and recreational protection. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. Before we go back to Director Ties, I'm going to go to Director McMahon. She had her hand up.
Yes, this needs to be a separate motion and not to confound the two different issues because they are somewhat different. And the concerns of logging adjacent to a residential area are not the same as the concerns in this particular case. So I think we do need a different motion.
All right, so maybe even perhaps a different letter, a second letter altogether. Okay, separately. I'll let our directors think about a motion and see if there's any other questions for Mr. Muirhead while he's here. Director Hiltz, please.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I guess I'm kind of interested in how you see during the campaign period, the Elphinstone expansion was talked about in various venues. And when you say park, what do you mean by a park? Like opposed to other options, and have you looked at other kinds of ways to preserve land, and kind of where you've gone with that idea?
Yeah, there's certainly other land use protection statuses that you could look at. There's old growth management areas, there's wildlife habitat areas. Those can be kind of disjunctive. They're not large enough to, do a good enough job, in our opinion, to protect this area. I mean, in terms of a provincial park, and its uses, within the management plan itself of a provincial park, you can specify certain activities that can be allowed or not allowed within the management plan. So in terms of First Nations uses, which we're quite sensitive to, within the management plan, that's where the First Nations consultation is important to put in there that traditional uses can continue, for, various activities. And also the high recreational component of a park can be added in there for mountain biking and, the high recreational use. It could be a conservation area, that is another land status. I mean, we're not hung up on park, it's just, one avenue to use. So destination isn't really all that important in terms of the objectives here is to protect this, rare low elevation forest.
Director Julius, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just wondering what kind of you said that Wayne
McCory?
Yeah, he did an assessment of Clack Creek, like a fish assessment, habitat assessment, those types?
Yeah, it was more of a forest ecosystem assessment.
Okay, so
and wildlife habitat.
Okay, so nothing. He didn't slap electroshock or anything like that in the creek to find out a species.
Oh, for fish species?
Yeah.
No, he didn't do a fisheries assessment.
Oh, okay. Because the reason why I ask, I actually myself worked with a biologist, and we actually did an assessment on Clack Creek.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was like about, I don't know, about the year 2000, I think it was. So we walked Clack Creek, and for the same thing, the red-tailed or red-legged frog. But back then we didn't find anything.
Mm-hmm.
But, I walked the creek, and I've seen how beautiful it is.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the day, when we were done, I do recall the biologist, he made the comment of the habitat for the red-legged frog. His comment was there was nothing better.
Okay.
So I just wanted you all to know. And again, I have walked it. I have seen how beautiful the creek is, and I would hate to see it get destroyed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, as you know, Clack Creek meets Roberts Creek just above Lower Road there, so it contributes to the fish habitat of Roberts Creek. Yeah.
Director Ties?
Yeah, thank you. As you can see, I'm still in the learning process here. So I see that the previous motion was not properly introduced, and so I'm wondering if there's a way of that we can introduce a motion today, considering that the timeliness of this matter. And maybe we can incorporate Mr. Hall's comments into the recommendation into the recommendation, so that we can come forward with a resolution at today's meeting.
Okay, and Director Seegers, I think you were going to have a question regarding this.
Yes, it sounds like staff has actually been dealing with this for a number of years and could potentially put forward a recommended motion.
Over to staff.
Can staff just have 2 minutes, please? Thanks.
Oh, I'll allow.
Thank you.
We'll just take 2 minutes. Directors, do you have any other questions for our present? Okay, Director Lamb, please.
So my understanding is that the province mandates park areas for different, I'll say, constituent areas in our province. And I believe that it was quite a few years ago that the province moved parklands out of the Squamish area and brought them over here. So I believe that we have a 20% park dedication in our area, which is overprescribed. So, I mean, this is just, this is my understanding. So the situation is if we take this and make this parkland, then is there areas that the province can take out of other parklands or give up other areas for harvesting? Because, forestry is part of what we do in British Columbia.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're taking, if we're going to give up this parkland here, if we're going to give up this cutting permits here or the right to harvest in this area, it should be appropriate that, we give up something else so that.
Well, in terms of the provincial-wide targets for protected areas, it's kind of a moving figure. So and we're talking about, so it's 140 hectares right now within the park. So we add a total of, we actually, through Macquarie, his mapping showed it's not actually 1,500, it's 2,100 hectares as a new park area. But the provincial government sets the annual allowable cut every year. So if a certain amount of area is taken away from their operating area, they can adjust and move to other areas to cut. So the Sunshine Coast Forest District is huge. So taking out say another 1,500 hectares from their operating area is minuscule.
I wonder if I could just add one detail to that. I'm also part of ELF. Regarding the proportion of parks set aside, that's what you were referring to. The Sunshine Coast is actually one of the lowest portions of public land set aside as park in the province, because the land use plan was never completed here in the 90s when land use plans were being made over quite a few areas of the province, but it was never done for the Sunshine Coast, and that's one of the reasons why there's talk about carrying on with the land use plan now. So as far as the protected areas and parks go, the Sunshine Coast has one of the lowest proportions, not even close to the provincial target.
Director Theis.
I believe the figure is somewhere around 3% of the 2 million hectares that are forestable, that is logging land. So I do agree with the delegation here that this is that we need more parkland here, and that's why I'm hoping that this land use plan will finally get some more of that here.
And then over to staff, please.
Thank you, Chair Pratt. So just to follow up before I hand it over to GM Hall with a potential draft recommendation, there was, just to correct, so Director Lamb had referenced the cut blocks and sort of that process. And through the education sessions that we had in 2017 with BC Timber Sales and APCs that were invited and the directors, it really became, we understood that yes, there is a provincial number that is established, but then there is also a local number that is established. And so when a community starts to move that established cut number, it does go somewhere else. So there is a trade-off at some level that they will be looking for. And that was really clear through those educational sessions that we had. So that's just one. Those numbers are established by the forester, the provincial forester, and that is the mandate that BC Timber Sales has to establish. How it is established can be a variety of different ways, but that number is the target number that they have to reach. And the second part is what we understand as staff through the past couple of discussions and over the years is that we understand that the province is not looking to establish more provincial parks across the entire province. They're not looking to increase their land inventory at this point. So I'm going to ask GM Hall. Sorry, clarification.
I'm going to put Director Seegers. She has a question first for clarification.
Yes, so you were saying BC Timber Sales has a certain amount they have set aside as a cut area. In our area, then, if we were to ask that they move the allocation, does that stay in our area or does that go somewhere else in the province? I guess that is to Director Lamb's question.
It stays in our area.
Okay, so the
by
question,
by the provincial forester's mandate.
Right. So his question to Mr. Muirhead was, if we take this land out, where else in our area are we going to give them to cut? Not somewhere else in the province, but in our area.
BC Timber Sales planners have a lot of flexibility in where they choose to place their cut blocks. So, for example, the Mount Elphinstone map area is about 7,000 hectares. So that includes, from Wilson Creek up towards Dakota Bowl and back down again, including the Reed Road forests. So there's a lot of juggling around. If they defer a cut block within the park proposal area, then they can take, for instance, if it's a 25 acre cut block or 25 hectare cut block, they can put that block somewhere else within that planning area. So there's a lot of flexibility, and they do adaptive management. If they feel that the public and the RD is adamant that there be no cut blocks within the park proposal area, they'll just take that 25 hectares and move it somewhere else. So we're seeing right now on the east side of the B&K Road a new cut block right on the edge of the park. It's another 25 hectares. So there's a lot of juggling around that they can do, and they're flexible, and they're land managers. They know where the timber is, and they can allocate to different locations.
If I could just add one detail to that. ELF has had some meetings with BC Timber Sales over the last 2 years, and we've actually put it in writing to them and in discussions that we would be willing to work with them to find 27 hectares a year outside of the proposed park area. The 27 hectares, your staff probably have that in their documents as well. That's kind of the stated objective of BC Timber Sales, that they would log per year in the Elphinstone map area. So that's, and we've, contrary to what people have said about us, we've said that we would actually cooperate with BC Timber Sales to find 27 hectares of previously logged areas outside of the park area.
Okay. Thank you. I'm going to go over to staff, and Mr. Hall, please.
Thank you, Chair Pratt. Staff listened to the dialogue on at the board table and have put together a couple of draft motions that we hope respond to the intent. So they are, first, it's two parts. Firstly, that SCRD write to the Minister of Forest Lands, Natural Resource Operations and Rural Development and BC Timber Sales, requesting that, absent further provincial land use planning for Mount Elphinstone, the sale of cut block A93884 be halted, and that past correspondence opposing harvesting of this cut block be included with the letter. Thank you.
Okay. Directors, do I have a mover for that motion? So moved, Director Ties. Do I have a seconder? Director McMahon, any debate on the motion on the floor? Directors, any comments? Okay. Oh, sorry, Director Lamb, go ahead.
Yeah, I just, it sounds to me like we better get this land use discussion underway sooner than later. That's all.
So noted. Okay, seeing no more comments, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor of the motion on the floor? Those opposed? Seeing none, the motion carries. I'm going to say thank you very much, gentlemen, for your presentation.
Okay. Thank you for your time and support today.
Okay, thank you so much. Don't forget to turn off the microphone, please.
Did Wayne find any frogs?
Ross, can you turn off the microphone, please?
Yeah.
Thanks, Gail. Okay. I'm going to give you a couple of minutes. I know that most of you, as scintillating as our board meetings are, most of you may not be staying. We really appreciate if you do. We have tea, coffee, water here for you. So please feel free to stay. But I will give you a moment if you wanted to move out of the room. Or lock the door so you can't. Okay. Okay, we are just going to continue on with our meetings. So I'm going to ask directors. We have some recommendations coming forward. The next item on our agenda is reports. And we do have some recommendations coming forward. Before we move those recommendations as a whole on 5, 6, and 6A, I wanted to see if any of the directors wanted to pull any of those out before we move them as a whole. Okay, seeing none, may I have a motion to move the recommendations for the Planning and Community Development Committee of November 15th, Infrastructure Committee recommendations of November 15th, and the Corporate and Services Committee recommendation number 8 of November 22nd? Okay, moved Julius, seconded Beamish. All those in favor? Those opposed? None. Motion carries. Okay. CAO's report on pages 29 to 30. No, that was in there. Oh, I did all of them all at once. Efficiency. Okay, and we'll move to CAO Lovey's report on starting on page 29. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Pat. So this report is provided for the board's information, and I provide it once a month, and so I'm happy to take any questions that the board might have.
Okay, I'm going to start with Director Seegers, please.
Thank you. On page 29, I noticed that you are working with the CAOs and Association of Vancouver Island and Coastal Communities with regards to the Special Committee on Solid Waste Management and the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure. That's also a committee, is it not? Or is this a different committee than the one that somebody from the board would sit on? Because I know that there's a solid waste management committee as well. Is this separate from that?
CAO?
Thank you. So there is a AVICC Special Committee on Solid Waste, and the regional district is a participant on that, and will have a report that will delegate a board member to sit at that table alongside other elected officials. Underneath that, there is an administration group, and that administration group is made up of the CAOs, and then there's also a subcommittee of communications, and then there's a subcommittee of technical staff. So there are staff from all of the regional districts supporting the work of that AVICC committee.
Thank you. I have one more.
Yeah, please go ahead.
The next page, at the top, it indicates that you've been traveling to various locations to have open discussions with staff. So I'm just wondering who else travels with you, or do you go by yourself? How does this actually work? How does this play out?
CAO?
Thank you, Chair Pat. So this is an engagement that I introduced almost, about over 3 years ago now, and it was at the request of staff where they wanted to be able to see the CAO out in their work stops or workplaces. And there's a variety of topics that the staff identify they want to hear about, so often I'm bringing other staff along, and they are participating as well in the discussions. And so we're sharing corporate information and then opportunities for staff to ask questions.
Okay. Directors, any other directors' questions for the CAO based on her report? Seeing none from the other directors, I'll ask regarding procurement and SCRD procurement practices. I was just wondering if some of our policy happens to address social procurement and social procurement policies.
Thank you, Chair Pratt. So I included this notation specifically to say that we have been doing a lot of work at a staff level to understand some of those processes. But in specific to the board policy question, I'm going to ask our CFO because she would be leading that charge.
Yeah, so I think, is the question more about do we do social procurement, or do we have social procurement as a policy in our policy statement?
I think it's probably both, whether or not we do social procurement and whether or not we have a social procurement specific policy.
Right, so we do have a purchasing policy that's endorsed by the board. That policy is up to be reviewed by this current board in 2019. We're targeting, just from a planning perspective, around April Q2 of 2019. We don't have anything currently that explicitly states social procurement as it is mandated within the current provincial group and the work that's been going on as it relates to the provincial organizations, if that's what you're referring to. There is statements within our current policy to give some preferences within the guidelines of trade agreements, et cetera, because there are definitely some changes with the trade agreements that will have some impacts to this, so we'll make sure we bring that to contemplate, but there's a preference that if all things being equal, we do give preference to local suppliers.
Okay, thank you. Directors, any other questions for the report? For staff? Oh, Director Hiltz.
Maybe you could just tell me a little bit about social procurement.
I certainly can, actually. So social procurement policy is it's geared around when you're putting, when government organizations are putting items out for tender, that they, it's giving preference to, or giving additional points, I should say, when you're putting out referrals to projects that help out disadvantaged or provide a little bit more support to within the local area, like, for example, training disadvantaged youth maybe, or those kinds of things. So there's AVICC, so the Association of Vancouver Island Coastal Communities, does have a social procurement working group that's been that's made up of other directors and mayors that's been going on for a couple of years, and I can certainly forward more information. I've sat in my previous role as a school board trustee on that committee, and there's some really interesting policy around that, especially when you're looking at us on the Sunshine Coast being very isolated in a number of areas. It helps to protect some of our procurement, so it stays on coast, especially with some government policy, larger government policy, provincially and federally, can sometimes hamper choosing local policies. So this is it's a way of promoting more economic development from a social aspect in the community. Oh, and Director Seekers can speak to it as well.
Thank you. Actually, Gibson's was involved in the pilot project, so the town of Gibson's has some information. There will be more information at AVICC, and given the federal and international trade agreements, it actually looks at how do you implement this locally. An example that I know our neighbors, the Shuswap Nation, are doing is on the Tim Hortons project, for example. They put it in that whoever came and won that had to actually engage some of the First Nations residents as employees on that project. So that would be an example of social procurement that actually has a local impact. What the pilot project did was look at how do you actually identify the items that you could include, and then how do you weight those, and how do you measure them? Because we have to be able to be objective when it comes to representing those with regards to the international trade agreements. Okay, so there will be more information at the AVICC conference that we'll be going to, so watch for those sessions and we can get more information. Thanks.
Okay. Director Hiltz?
So basically, it's kind of how do we use the money that's on the coast for the coast to benefit from the coast? Okay.
Within current larger trade agreements that we are legally obligated to follow.
Right.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Director Theis.
Yeah, and thank you, Chair Pratt. In light of the delegation this morning, I also just remembered that we had that in the report there was a joint meeting held with ICE and dry floor groups, and I'm to discuss the facility allocation process. And I'm wondering if we can get a report as to what the situation was and if there's any resolutions that have come out of that.
Over to staff.
Thank you, Chair Pratt. So yes, the intention is certainly to report back to the groups and then also to the board. GM Hall, did you want to add anything in terms of anything else?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, CAO. The motions this morning and the work that will follow, I think, will in part serve as a follow-up step to that meeting, but as well as noted this morning, continuing dialogue with the groups in support of continuous improvement, be it about space or allocation or scheduling, is something that staff are always working on. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Directors, any other questions for the CAO? Okay, seeing none, we're going to move receipt of the CAO's report, please. So moved and seconded. All those in favor? Motion carries. We have no communications or motions or bylaws, but we do have directors' reports. And I'm going to start over on my far left with Area F. Or I could go, well, okay, certainly. Okay, Director Hiltz, please.
I have nothing to report.
Thank you. Director Beamish, please.
Well, I have a little bit more than that to report. Gibson's held its first council meeting with the new council this past Tuesday, both committee and council meeting, and I feel that they were successful as well, and I appreciate all the support again from staff here and the learning that we're doing. One of the things we are doing with Gibson's is we are applying through UBCM for a grant for fire interface study, and we do have a recognized person in our community who does that kind of work. So we're quite fortunate in that regard. So we'll be putting together a grant. Now, the timeline for that grant was December 2nd to be submitted. So, December 7th to be submitted. So we came at it a little bit late. I discovered it on the UBCM website and feel that it's important to us again because we have a lot of trees, and with the drought situation we're having from successive years, we see the ability to kind of impair the forest's ability to fight fires. You know, droughts will create a lot of more duff on the forest floor, and that becomes tinder in the summertime, and it builds up over time. And so we just wanted to take an initiative to initiate a study in that regard. So we'll be doing that.
Thank you, Director Beamish. Over to Director Lamb.
I guess my biggest challenge has been I got 3 computers now. I didn't like having one, but I got 3 now. So anyways, I'm getting through that. But basically strategic planning, that's where I've been for most of my time, I guess, over the last couple of weeks. And then we had our first council meeting last night, and I thought it went over very well, and I'm quite pleased to be with the group I am at the District of Sechelt. So, and also here. This is very nice, very enjoyable to be with you folks. So thank you.
Well, you're welcome. It's a pleasure to have you here, Director Lamb. And I'm going to go over to my right to Director Seegers, please.
Thank you. I have to say it's been my biggest challenge. Yes, that's the technology as well. I mean, I turned down the extra laptop with the District of Sechelt. I figured 5 different things was enough. I wasn't going to take the 6th. I think for us from the municipalities, and I think Director Beamish could reiterate as well, is that not only are we doing orientations here, but we're doing orientations at our own municipalities. So, for example, this week, 4 days out of our 5, and then on top of that, we have our own meetings and our own packages to read. So I think we're looking forward, for us, I think we'll be finished about December 4th. So this month has been full on, going flat out, every day, all day, just to try and keep on top of everything. So thank you for the patience that you're showing us as we're also learning and becoming familiar with all of this. I wanted to just focus on something that I'm seeing in the community. Over the last week, I've been to a number of events. The Black Boot event. I went to the St. Hilda's reopening. I'm hosting the 100 Women Who Care. And what I'm seeing in the community is our community is very generous. And it's continually being reflected back that they're giving to others in the community who need that support. For the Black Boot event, for example, it's raising money and giving back to those who are dealing with cancer in their families. It's funds that are available to those who have additional expenses when dealing with that. And when I went to St. Hilda's, the reopening, they mentioned a number of the organizations on the coast, the businesses that donated to their rebuilding of their facility, and in some cases where the trades went out of their way or actually just donated some of the stuff because they didn't have the funds. So it's really nice to see the community pulling together and supporting others and other organizations. So I just wanted to make a note of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Director McMahon.
Yes, I've been busy too. I was out on Sunday with the Block 1313 people. I dropped in on Gibson's to the Committee of the Whole to see how they were doing. That was Tuesday. I attended the Transportation Choices AGM at the Gumboot Cafe. They gave me a round of applause when I arrived, and I thought, gosh, am I that popular? But it turns out they were concerned about quorum. So, and I also dropped in on the Thrive Women's Business Group in Lower Gibson's last night. And, of course, I'm getting lots of correspondence from residents on Block 1313 and Pratt Road and a few other things. My website is up and running, and I'm keeping it as up-to-date as I humanly can. And there are some upcoming events. The Saturday is, I believe I mentioned it before, but the Elphinstone Community Association is hosting a Meet Your Neighbor party and potluck at Chester House from 5 to 10 p.m. Will be attending the Trails Society AGM next week. That's November 26th at the Arts Centre in Sechelt. And tonight is the Coast Car Co-op fundraiser, beer and burger fundraiser at the 101.
Thank you. Over to Director Ties.
Thank you, Chair Pratt. And in the last week or so, we've had the OCP committee meeting here, and big focus there was on short-term rental housing and the upcoming and the consultation process behind that. So thank you for Planner Siao for being there. And then we also had the APC meeting this week, and there was more deliberations there. Thank you to Planner, the General Manager of Planning, Alan, and I'm sorry I forgot Jonathan's last name. But thank you for those guys for coming out and sticking around for a long time, because I think we were done by 9:30. And so that was for the short-term rental, and another big item was the Largo Road, where we're going to be engaging with the Ministry of Transportation. We're having some individuals put some emails that way and seeing if we can come up with some solutions to not make Largo Road the new shortcut to get down into the creek. So that's a big concern in our community right now, especially in the Largo Road area. Thank you also to George Smith, who I took up his offer, and him and I walked up to Chapman Lake, and I went and had a look at the dam firsthand, and the intake and the siphon system that's been winterized there. So that was just neat to see. I hadn't had a chance to see all that yet. So and it was a beautiful day and a beautiful hike, and you can check my website for some gorgeous pictures. And mentioning website, yes, Donna's been very inspirational in her website, so I'm working on mine as well and improving it. And if anybody else here has a website, then I think we should interlink and connect and maybe borrow from each other as we need to make the resources for our electorate as comprehensive as possible. And I'm certainly willing to share in that kind of regard. So thank you for all that.
I was going to comment during my report about Director Tighe's and McMahon's websites. They're both fantastic. So if you haven't had a chance to look at them yet, please do. It's a great way to keep up to date or keep your constituents up to date. And it's a different platform than using social media, but it's a more reliable platform and less maybe controversial. So over to Director Julius, please.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. I don't have a lot report-wise. Just a couple items I wanted you all to know is we have been negotiating with Lehigh for some time now. They want an extension on their lease, so we've been meeting with them, and the meetings have been going great for us, and that's a really good thing. And also, a few days ago, I seen how happy our Hayos was, Warren Paul, and I guess he just received a call from Trellis, and he was saying that we will be expecting some good news before the year's end. And if anybody has any questions on those two items, call Chief Warren Paul. Thank you.
So noted. Director Lee.
Thank you. First off, I was just kind of giving you guys a warning that I submitted my first article to the Harbor Spiel. So hopefully it's okay. Makes you nervous whenever you have to do something in short order like that. I've been quite challenged to read all the material that's presented to us prior to the meeting. And so I can imagine what the two municipalities are going through. Wow, it'd be double what I've got. Yeah, can't imagine. Plus, I had an anniversary and 2 birthdays in November, too. So I did have a look at both of the websites, Director Tees and Director McMahon, and I sure am jealous. They sure did a nice job. I think they were actually volunteering to help me do mine. Is that no? Darn. Anyways, that's my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Lee. For me, it's the amount of email correspondence and phone calls I've received has gone up astronomically, which is interesting, but it's a lot of fun. So I've been meeting a lot with my constituents, including my first trip out to North Thormanby Island. I can't believe I've lived here 24 years, and it was my first trip out there earlier this week, and I know where I'm going to be hiding. If you need to find me, I'll be in my constituency across the water. But we had a great tour, so thank you to Shirley and Russ Higginson for touring me around the island and speaking to me on some of the island issues. It's a different way of life living on the island, and so I welcome any of the other directors to go out and take a look as well. A few things that are coming up over the next few weeks on behalf of the board. I will be meeting with our MLA in a couple of weeks, so if you have any comments or concerns or questions you want me to bring forward, let me know. And as well as with our Member of Parliament in December when she's on coast, we'll be meeting and speaking. Next week, Director Seegers, Director Beamish, and myself, we're skipping out on part of the budget consultations, our budget conversation, I should say, to head over to Vancouver Island on the 30th to meet with the ICE-T group and discuss some issues there, and then we'll be back for the afternoon. Or not. A sad thing that happened in our community, we lost one of our local longtime residents from Marilyn Lyons, passed away earlier this month. Her family lived in the Cooper's Green area in an area called Lyons Cove. And so she passed away, so we've lost a longtime community member. But a positive thing that's going on is in December, all of the locally elected women are going to have a gathering here on the coast, and I've put the invitation out, and we've got actually a really good complement of us that'll be able to attend a luncheon and just help to share stories and help support each other. And that date will be sent out later today. So that's a really exciting initiative I'm happy to be a part of, and very excited about that. So
I just have to say, if any of the gentlemen would like to put on a dress and come, they probably...
Okay. And
that'd be interesting.
Oh, okay, please. Okay, and with that, that's my report for today. We have no more new business. We're not going in camera, so I will ask for a motion to adjourn, and then we'll go to questions. So motion, seconded. All those in favor? Okay, questions. We'll go to Sophie first as a member of the media.